Hello and welcome to Assure Learns. Whether you are joining us live right now or watching the replay, glad you're here. What Assure Learns is all about is it's a webinar series where we provide the training and knowledge that you need to effectively manage your workplace and safety programs and have the confidence that you're meeting the occupational health needs and requirements of your employees. So we offer these webinars every other month. So we invite you to stay connected, follow us on socials, we have a newsletter, email newsletter you can sign up for that Carrie sends out reminders to let you know about the upcoming webinars that we're offering. So I invite you to get in touch with us and get connected so you can stay educated about what's current and upcoming, any changes in the OC health world. And as well as we just like to keep you educated on the services that we offer that impact your role, whether you're in HR, whether you're in safety. You can also check out our YouTube channel where we've got all of these webinars are held. Once we complete them, they're on our channel. You can go back and view them. If you want to get more information, learn more about oral fluid drug testing versus urine testing, for example, return to duty programs, physical abilities testing, what is hearing protection fit testing, how often do we need to do that? Got loads of videos there that you can check out and learn more. Keep yourself educated and up to date. So my name is John Riccocci. I'm the founder and CEO of Assure Occupational Testing. And here at Assure, what our goal is, it's simple. Our goal is to ensure workers are fit for duty and workplaces are safe. And how we do that is through drug and alcohol testing, occupational health testing, and through training. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to take a closer look at what I feel like is one of the lesser understood areas of our industry, which is the role of the substance abuse professional or a SAP assessment. A lot of you will know that term, a SAP or SAP or SAEP, but generally we go with the term SAP, substance abuse professional. So we're going to dive into and answer the question. Essentially, the SAP's role helps us answer the question about if somebody tests positive on a drug and alcohol test or otherwise violates a component of your company's drug and alcohol policy. It answers the question of now what? Now, what do we do with this employee? Are they safe to return to work? Generally, the answer is most often no, or at least the answer is we don't know. We need to do some more. We need to do an assessment. We need to get some more information. So a SAP assessment becomes the first step in that process. So that's what we're diving into today. And so today we've got Scott Heil with us. He is a substance abuse professional who we use a lot here at Assure Occupational Testing. We've been referring to Scott for many, many years. So let me tell you a bit about Scott. So he is a Canadian certified addiction counselor, an internationally certified alcohol and drug counselor, and a U.S. Department of Transportation certified substance abuse professional. He's got more than 15 years of experience providing safety-sensitive assessments and recommendations across a wide variety of industries. And I feel like at Assure, we've been partnering with Scott for at least half of that time, 15 years doing assessments. I was looking this morning and trying to figure out how long we've been in a relationship with Scott. I would guess 8-ish years. What I appreciate about Scott, a couple things that we at Assure appreciate about Scott is that he is really good at tailoring his recommendations to the specific needs of every employee. Every individual is different, and their treatment needs, their recommendation needs are different. Where they live, what community they're in. We work with a lot of people in a lot of different industries and a lot of different communities. Not everybody is local. We work with some companies and employees who live in many different provinces, and Scott's good at tailoring the assessments and needs to the community, what the community can offer for treatment and recovery and supporting this employee in getting back to work quickly and safely. So that's just one of the things I appreciate about Scott. So Scott, thank you so much for being here with us today. Let me bring you up bigger. There we are. Hello, Scott.
Hi, thanks for having me, John.
Absolutely. Appreciate you taking some time today. So, to begin, first question is who is a substance abuse professional and what's their role in this whole return to duty process?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we could probably spend a long time talking about that. I'll just kind of try to hit on some main points here. I guess the other introduction that I didn't give you is that I'm a lifelong Cincinnati Bengals fan. So don't make fun of me, please. It's been a lot of decades of suffering. But as far as the SAP, yeah, like there's certain requirements to be a SAP. Like for most, unless you're a physician. If you're a physician, you can play the role of a SAP. Outside of that, though, like for any of us, outside of that, typically we have to have certain criteria. Some of it is, there's some different ways about getting those, but they're pretty long, stringent processes. The certification that I would have is the International Alcohol and Drug Counselor certification, which allows me to do safety sensitive assessment. That's kind of the prerequisite to do that. I've got some other ones, but that's about it. And then the role of a SAP really is just to, I guess there's a few different roles, but really it's just to determine the intensity of the intervention for each individual situation. Um, it's not a counseling session, so it's comprehensive assessment. Um, the things that, there's a lot more stakeholders involved in as well, rather than, your regular public service where you're doing client-centered counseling. It's more comprehensive assessment. So, you not only have the employee and the employer or the third-party administrator, but you also have, workplace safety to consider, public safety, the safety of the public sometimes, or, the integrity as well, and, some situations as well. So really just trying to determine, what people need and match that to each situation to be able to return to work safe and effectively going forward. So in a
One of the
nutshell.
things that I appreciate about you and the training that you've got is, you're trained to USDOT standards, which I know just we talk about that a lot in our industry. The cutoff levels for drug and alcohol are set by the USDOT, and it can seem like why do we, what's up with the USDOT? Why do we care about that? Why are we following that here in Canada? Well, that's in North America. That's the highest level of training and certification. Those are the drug concentration cutoff levels that we follow. And that the same applies for the SAP certification. That's the highest standard in North America is that. And you've got that, which is why we refer to you at Assure. And the other reason why we appreciate that is because in the Canadian model, which a lot of HR and safety managers are quite familiar with here in Canada. Best practice for drug and alcohol policies and is, we follow the Canadian model. And it talks about, who's qualified to be a SAP. And there's a broad range of people that the Canadian model says qualify to be a SAP. And personally, after 17-ish years in the industry, there's a lot of people that are on that list that I would not recommend an employer refer somebody to because a lot of them don't understand the unique needs and um, just the uniqueness of this role, where the SAP needs to provide an assessment and then a report to the company to create a return to duty program. And a lot of people, physicians, potentially counselors, if a company says, refers to a counselor, refers to a physician, somebody who's failed a test to get an assessment, a lot of them don't understand that they need to provide some information to the company to create a return to work plan. Whereas you and the USDOT standard is that you're trained to understands that and understands that there's lots of information the employee is going to tell you in that assessment that you're not going to share, but there's a lot of important information that needs to be shared.
Yeah, I
Um,
get if I could touch a little bit more on that too. Like, I think that's a good point, or maybe we'd have opportunity to get into it later too. I
go
have
for it.
the privilege, like I'm very grateful because I'm able to do this, full time and wear the same hat with these same responsibilities. Where, like you were mentioning, a lot of other people there that might have some similar, uh, might be SAPs or other iterations of that. Typically, they wear different hats from what they do regularly.
Hmm.
So there are some challenges, and I definitely can expand on some of these in my own personal experience when I started out. I was lucky enough to have a mentor too to kind of, remind me of some of the other expectations of it as well, because it is quite a bit different than client-centered counseling, a lot of other things at play. So yeah, good to touch on that, or maybe I'll have some time to expand later.
Well, tell us about it. Let's walk through the process for us, if you could. And we'll start with, somebody, an employee, let's say they test positive on a drug test, and the company wants to refer them for a SAP assessment. Walk us through the process.
Sure, yeah, like generally, in referral, the employee's name and contact information would be there. The nature of the violation, was it a positive alcohol and drug test, or was it a self-disclosure or some other situation like that that would prompt a SAP request? And so typically I would contact the employee, schedule a date and time to complete it. And while I do that, I kind of like to let the employee know what to expect. So it's going to be, comprehensive. So set aside some time, generally about 2 hours or a bit more, give or take. So make sure you set aside some time if you can. If they can have some privacy on their end, generally it's going to help, be less distractful. And then we'll determine kind of what route we're going to connect virtually. Like as I was mentioning with you guys, it was good to see you face to face. So rather than over the phone. If it's an iPhone that they have, we do FaceTime. If it's a Samsung, Google Meets. If they have a laptop and want to do Zoom, that works as well. And typically, it's scheduled in a couple days of the referral, and generally, the employer or the third party administrator would have the report within 24 hours after it's done, typically. So, but these processes could vary, I guess, between SAP to SAP, right? So.
Yeah, I think that touched on a question that we get a lot is, how quick can how quick can we get somebody in, and how quick are we getting that report back? And this happens really quickly. That's one thing we're really grateful with working with you is generally we can schedule it from the time a company calls us and says, "Can you make our schedule a SAP assessment?" We're getting that scheduled in a couple days, and like Scott says, we get the report back from Scott within sometimes same day, if not the next day, that we then get over to you, the company. So this is a really quick process because we understand people are off work. Everybody's waiting. We don't know what to do next. So sometimes they're off work with pay, without pay. It all varies by company. So we get the time sensitive nature of this. So it's a quick process. So is there anything that the person at a company who's making the referral, whether it's safety manager, HR, anything that they can tell you as the SAP assessor that's helpful? What's helpful information?
Yeah, like what I find helpful anyway, I can't speak for other SAPs. Mind you, I don't know many other ones, or there's not a lot of us around that I know of anyway that do this with any amount of great frequency. But the nature of the infraction or the violation obviously is good to know, and more information the better. Like if there's previous history of prior concerns, that's always good to know. Anything else that kind of is pertinent is good to get, within reason. Like I quite enjoy when I get more information and kind of, you know, sometimes I don't even get the nature of the violation or what happened. I got to kind of sleuth it together on my own, right? So that does help.
So the more the better. And this is
Yeah.
something that we help companies with, managers with as well. We'll ask and then we provide that to Scott. Um, but generally the more the better. When you find, which makes me think about, when you're face to face with an employee, during an assessment, do you always get all of the information out of them, or are you getting the full story? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess we'll get right to the meat and potatoes of what people might find interesting here. I think it's good to recognize though that, it isn't an exact science, right? Like, and anybody that tells you it is, I'd be a little skeptical, right? Like, we're all human. We're all fallible. You know what I mean? Like, I think the process is important too, obviously, and experience and things like that. Just just people might be interested. Like, been doing this for probably about 15 years or more. Or maybe even close to 10 years prior to the pandemic, and it kind of went from in person, local to the pandemic hit and kind of opened it up to virtual outside of Saskatoon where I reside, and then Western Canada, and but so you're able to see a lot more people and get that expertise to them, but you still only have 2 hours to get it done, right? Or a little bit more. And so it is pretty comprehensive assessment. So history, I'm really big on, past history, child, things that have really been impactful for people over their life, like any kind of neglect, trauma, abuse, those kind of things. Previous treatment history, previous relationship history, that kind of stuff, mental health, legal history, touching base on all those kind of things and going deeper where it need to be. I think the misconception a lot of time is that you're talking 100% about substances. And that's certainly not the case in these. Like, we do definitely do that and do get details in that, but I think it is a lot more comprehensive that we go into. Um, Sometimes, past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior, not always, right? But it gives you a kind of a starting point to work on and tailor, support that's appropriate for each individual and each individual situation. So a combination of history combined with some screening, if need be, to kind of confirm or to ensure that you're kind of coming up with a good impression and recommendations that make sense. So
Got it. And yeah, the information that the company has can be really helpful to that too, because not always is the individual going to be, some are going to be really forthcoming, some not as forthcoming, I would imagine. So having background and the workplace uh, knowledge can be really helpful for you, I'm
yeah,
sure.
and honestly, like, I think I can say, from my personal experience, like, I've learned from errors in the past, right? Like, when I first started, I had the luxury of having a mentor for a couple of years, which was, I think it's kind of unheard of these days for someone to have a mentor. So when I was dipping my toes into this and interested, it's a big shift in public service to do safety sensitive assessments. So I had the luxury of that. I had someone to kind of keep me in line and make sure I didn't go astray. So those would be some things I'd be thinking about when thinking about getting a SAP as well. But the other thing is, maybe if I can tell a really quick story here just to illustrate a point. Just about we learn from ourselves, right? None of us know everything, and we're all fallible. Like, I don't know if anybody's got any psychologist friends or colleagues or anything. But I don't know if you've had the pleasure of getting, trying to get in an argument with one, or trying to get an argument with God or your version of God. But I wonder if anybody's ever had difficulty differentiating the difference between the two sometimes. Um, but why I say that is that, I've had the opportunity to make mistakes and learn from them. And I think over the years, we used to do about 100 or 150 a year prior to the pandemic, and now it's kind of about 300 a year since, for the last 6 years.
Wow.
So I think just those numbers, you see situations, you kind of get more consistent as you go, and you kind of learn what mistakes not to make. And I think that helps with the overall quality, I think, over time. I hope.
Tell us about so at the end of your assessment, a couple hour assessment where you're meeting face to face with an individual. What can we expect on that assessment report from you? Just walk us through that assessment report.
That's what I tend to like to keep things pretty short and consistent and sweet. And I think I've learned over the years not to add more information than is necessary sometimes. And I try to keep everything consistent. So you're going to get an impression that states whether your employee meets criteria for substance use disorder or not. And if they do, is it, more mild, or is it moderate, or is it severe? And then you're going to get a short list of recommendations that should be tailored to the need, to the appropriate level of intervention for each individual situation. So, and those things will range from, safety sensitive education on substances to counseling or outpatient programming up until, inpatient treatment, um, or 12-step meetings at sometimes. Yeah, that's kind of a nutshell of that.
So what if so that the beginning of that report is going to say, do they meet criteria for a substance use disorder or not? It's going to be mild, moderate, or severe. And then the treatment recommendations vary based on mild, moderate, or severe. What if they don't meet criteria?
Yeah, that's a good point because I think one of the misconceptions I see all the time is because someone failed an alcohol drug test that they have a dependency, or they're which the data, like I actually pull data every few years. No one ever asks for it, but yeah, I think you're right about, and things have changed since the legalization of marijuana too. We won't get sidetracked with that, but I think you're seeing a lot more. About 50% of people who fail alcohol and drug tests, I think on average, don't meet criteria for substance use disorder. Might even be less than that now. I think the last time I pulled information a couple of years ago, so it might be about 40% do.
Hmm.
Um, Whereas your self-disclosures, when people are coming forward and saying they have struggles or have met with their employer, and there's, things are pretty noticeable, there's some issues there. A higher percentage of self-disclosures are going to meet criteria as well. So
Hmm. So by self-disclosure, just to expand on that for somebody who might not be clear on that, self-disclosure means somebody comes to their employer and says, I have a problem with,
yeah, and
okay,
yeah, I think sometimes that happens. I think a much more likely scenario is probably someone's missing work, or not showing up, or coming in late, or performance is suffering, or co workers might bring forward some complaints, and during a kind of a more formal conversation with the employee, things come out, right? And then I think at some point the employee says, yeah, some of, to some extent, some of this is in relation to substance abuse or substance use, and which can prompt a SAP request as well for employers in that situation. So
yeah, thank you. And I think that's a good point and a good question that we can get is, if somebody self-discloses, what do we do? And the best practice would be refer them for a substance abuse professional assessment and get them assessed because what their needs are, what they need to look after them to get them the proper help that they need, we don't know. And not everybody is the same. So get them assessed and let's tailor them a treatment plan, a plan to return to work plan that's going to make sense for that individual. Because yeah, not everybody, I appreciate you saying that, not everybody who fails a drug test has a substance use disorder. And you're right. Post legalization of marijuana, there's a lot more marijuana. The positivity rate for marijuana has gone up. Not everybody who uses marijuana is dependent on marijuana. So the assessment will suss some of that out and determine. Scott's really good at determining what's an appropriate level of intervention here. So can you give us some examples of? Let's talk about that because it's still one of the big things we get questions about. Pot's legal, why are we still drug testing for it? Most of us still get why we're still drug testing for it. It's a impairment causing substance that's highly used. Post legalization, the population, Canadians are using more marijuana. So the potential for them to be in the workplace impaired has gone up post legalization. So it makes sense that we're still testing for it. But talk to us about somebody fails a drug test, they're referred for a SAP assessment, they don't meet criteria. What would some examples of recommendations for return to work be?
Yeah,
that you
like well,
make.
it's individual, right? Because there might be different things going on for different people. Even with you could have two people that fail a test for marijuana, but could be two totally different situations. Um, just as marijuana is so individual and people respond differently and their past usages are. So typically, though, when someone does fail an alcohol or drug test and they violated their policy, kind of over the years, we've kind of created some standard education by certified providers so that, so people who don't meet criteria aren't gonna are able to abstain from the substance for longer periods of times, or have illustrated that in the past, or just weren't thinking about it, or made a mistake as humans do, or maybe made poor choices, or maybe they didn't have a reason not to do what they were doing, but now they do, right? So for a lot of people, they're just going to need some education, learn more about some of these substances, how long they might stay in your system. Typically, we do a 2-hour education with certified providers so they can learn more about the substances, the impairing effects, potential impact on workplace safety, um, abstinence strategies if people need that, non-impairing alternatives to whatever they're using it for, strategies to clearly separate it from the workplace, those kind of things, right? And typically that's followed with an unannounced follow-up testing program as well, right? So really it's information to help people abide by their policy going forward and, obviously to ensure workplace and public safety as well. Whereas people that do meet criteria, and we see that a lot with cannabis, mild. A lot of times, if people with cannabis generally would meet mild to degree, we've seen some people that are more severe and might need something like inpatient treatment, but far fewer. Typically, it's just people have been using so long or so regularly that they haven't tried any other alternatives to manage what they're managing with it. So and then people who meet to a moderate degree are going to get something more like kind of that middle ground between education and treatment, counseling or therapy or there used to be lots of outpatient programs around. Now there's some online educational packages these days that kind of fit this area that some people are a good fit for. And then generally it's only those people that are really struggling or really dependent on substances that would need to go to inpatient treatment, or they might need more intensive support or longer supports than that as well. Kind of that would be the kind of the continuum, I guess.
It's good to have some examples about what we can expect for some treatment recommendations. So let's talk about the return to duty process as a whole. So a SAP assessment is one piece of the whole return to duty planning. So it's initiated with self-disclosure. I think I've got a problem with drinking, or if an employee comes and says, I think I've got a problem with drinking, or they fail a test, or there's a reasonable cause situation. So that's what starts the process to now we got to now we're stepping into the return to duty planning process. The first step would be a SAP assessment. Let's get them assessed and let's create that, get some recommendations for treatment. Then we receive that from Scott, and then we turn that into a return to duty agreement. We give you a draft copy. That's what we provide to each company. We give you a draft copy that's what you would take and sit down with your employee and get them to review. The manager would review, both would sign. If the employee wants to come back to work, return to work, they agree to abide by the terms of that return to duty agreement. And again, that agreement is based on Scott's assessment and based on the treatment recommendations that he's given in his professional judgment. So that's signed. Most often that's signed. I would say 95% of the time the employee agrees to it. Sometimes they don't. And then essentially, if they don't, they're choosing not to return to duty. But if they do, now it starts. Typically, we're seeing your recommendations are about 6 or 12 months. Would that be fair to say, Scott?
Yeah, usually 6 months is kind of the standard, and if they need to go longer than that, I guess we can tailor that, but generally 6 months.
Right. So the assessment is kind of the first step of a 6-month process. So the agreement, get that signed, the employee can go back to work. pending. There's quite often some pre-return to duty requirements that Scott recommends that could be going to inpatient detox, going to counseling, completing a return to duty drug test. These are just some examples. But can you talk to us about how can managers, how can the workplace best support that employee for the next 6 months? Because it's not enough to just, okay, we got them assessed, we signed the agreement. Okay, that's not, a lot of times we can forget about it. So how can we best support that employee over the next 6 months?
Yeah, it's a good question. You might have some input on that, like, because typically, once I've completed the assessment and submitted my report and recommendations, I don't usually have much contact with the employee or the employer at all, right? So, the third party administrator might have um, some thoughts on that and helping the employer. But I think one of the biggest thing is just kind of, yeah, not forgetting about it, following through with the recommendations as stated, if you can at all. And I think the more that employers do that, I think the smoother it'll get. I'm sure things will come up and there's challenges along the way. Um, but hopefully over time it'll become smooth or
I think that,
smoother.
like you said, that's just very simple but very important. Just don't forget about it. Because what we see is that's often what happens is we kind of forget about it. Um, and we at Assure do our part to with monthly compliance, giving each company a monthly update. Here's where things are at, whether they're attending counseling, whether they're going to their follow-up drug tests, and if they're not, then we give that information to the manager so that they can follow up. Um, but as I'm thinking about that too, I'm thinking sometimes you'll get 3 months in and find out that, things were going great, and then they stop going to counseling, and then they no show on an unannounced follow-up drug test. And there gets to be a consequence for that. We signed an agreement. Everybody agreed to, complete this over the next 6 months. And if we don't have consequences for non-compliance, then what's the point of doing this? For one thing, and the other thing is we're not supporting them in their recovery. We're not when we forget, when we kind of let it go by the wayside, we're actually doing the employee a disservice. We need to have consequences and follow through to support them in staying clean and sober. And which makes me think about there's been a few instances where we've referred employees back to you, Scott, for a reassessment. So can you talk about that? When would somebody need to be reassessed?
Yeah, well, I guess depending on the policy or the employer, right? Like I was just, as you were saying that, I was thinking about, this with one employer I have here locally that I do a lot of assessments through for a long time. We have a built-in 6 month review, like a SAP review after 6 months, just as kind of a part of the process. But yeah, if someone fails a test, I guess one of the options could be a reassessment, or if someone isn't following through with their recommendations. You know, if people aren't gonna, if the employer might want to choose some discipline of whatever kind, or a reassessment is an option to kind of see where things are and kind of adjust or adapt the recommendations as necessary, depending on the situation, right? So sometimes we've had some where SAP people were doing well and then really struggling, and maybe they didn't need to go to treatment the first time, but all kind of things upon reassessment would say that maybe now's the time. The individual thought they'd be able to kind of do it on their own with some community supports, but clearly that's not working. So maybe we need to up our intensity to help it more efficiently. So um, can you think of any other options when a reassessment would be appropriate, or?
Yeah, it's not always black and white, but the general situations would be, yeah, somebody's testing positive on a follow-up drug test, not attending counseling, or not complying with some other aspect of the agreement, um, and or their conditions getting worse. So. basically what you've said. And I appreciate what you said too. Is sometimes that's just an indicator that the level of intervention that it looked like would serve them in the beginning, that's not serving them now. Maybe they do need to actually go into an inpatient addiction treatment center, for example. Or one counseling session a month isn't quite enough support for them. They need to go to 2 sessions a month, as an example. So um, yeah, I think that's a good one to touch on, the reassessments. What if we get a few months in and if they're not complying, the next step would be to recommend that typically they're going to be removed from duty immediately, pending a reassessment is generally the recommendation that we would give. Um, Anything else that we're missing, Scott? Anything else to add? I feel like we've covered kind of generally start to finish the process, the SAP's role, and what employers can expect from a SAP. But anything that you think what we've missed?
Well, I think that's, try to keep things light and, and insightful, but I think we've hit on most things. I guess if people have questions other questions other than the ones that you asked here, if they're, I'm more than willing to kind of respond to those at a later date, or maybe I can attempt to do that anyway if people are interested in that.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate you being here. Appreciate our many year relationship and partnership with you and our return to duty process and your comprehensive and specific or employee tailored assessments. We're really grateful for our partnership with you. So thank you for your time, Scott.
Yeah, likewise, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about something we don't talk about much, I guess. So,
Absolutely. Answering some questions about, like I said, one of the lesser understood aspects of the industry. So thanks again. So I think yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways for today would be every individual, every employee is just that, an individual. Everybody needs to be treated uniquely. There's not a one size fits all answer to, if somebody fails a drug test, what do we do with them? It's everybody's got unique needs. So a SAP assessment is the starting place. We want to tailor the treatment plan, the return to duty plan based on do they meet criteria for substance use disorder, or do they not? And if they do meet criteria, is it mild, moderate, severe? So the first step after a drug and alcohol policy violation is always going to be substance abuse professional assessment. And that's what we're here to support you with at Assure, is making sure that you get all your questions answered about the process and that your employee gets back to work as quick as is safely possible, and that they get the help that they need to make sure that they can be healthy and you have a healthy and safe workplace. So once again, thanks to Scott and to each of you for being here. If you've got any questions about the SAP process, return to duty process, Carrie is here as well. She's happy to answer your questions. Most of you know Carrie. Reach out to her or myself by phone. And again, check out our YouTube channel for other videos about other services that we offer that are there to help you stay informed about how to do your job well and to stay up to date on what's happening in the occupational health and safety industry. So on behalf of all of us at Assure, thanks for being here, and we'll see you on the next one.